At a glance, Shrine's Legacy looks a little bit like Secret of Mana, but ends up capturing a variety of retro adventure games. It has an easy to use controller setting and plays better that way, but you can use keyboard if you prefer. The game is very playable solo. It's easy to swap characters, and it effectively gives you 2 magic bars, as magic restores itself with your attacks, sort of like in a Tales of game. However, this is a game that clearly would be more fun if played with another person. Not unlike Secret of Mana, a rare game of this type that has multiplayer and should be praised for that. If you play solo, the partner AI is fine. It usually doesn't do much better or worse than an average player at dodging attacks or dealing damage, but it doesn't use magic, so that's a downside to being solo. You're able to res your ally, but it does take time, and during a boss fight, some of them are pretty aggressive and won't give you much time to do so. For an indie game, it has very pretty retro-style sprites and graphics overall, as well as a pleasant, suitable soundtrack. Generally, the art style is functional. However, there are some transitional issues that you may see while playing on the review build, though those should be fixed for the official launch. Upon launching it, the game has a short, to-the-point introduction to the plot and characters, rather than a long, heavy story introduction as some JRPGs would have. Overall, the game has a bit of walking around and talking to people in towns, but it is fairly reasonable if you prefer to just get into fighting things. The story and characters are pretty basic. You get to know them with dialogue and backstories throughout the game, but it's not a major part of the experience. The bulk of the experience is in the combat and the exploration, and both are much closer to something like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past if there were only one retro game to compare it to. There's a fairly tight balance with how much you can upgrade your character. Your health and magic capacity is decided by items you can find or get from bosses, similar to the heart pieces. There's numerous upgrades that you can eventually obtain, and you have some choice in what to upgrade, but it's not like an RPG with major leveling and gear that can ultimately trivialize things. Advancement is slow and largely locked to how deep into the game you are. Some rewards come from exploring off the beaten path, and others will come just by progressing through the game. There is a leveling system, but the rewards from it are fairly minimal. It's not likely a game that you would go and grind levels to try and power through a part that is proving too hard. For the non-combat parts, there are plenty of puzzles and little side areas to explore. You will need to do some puzzle solving to complete the main game, most of which involves just looking around and observing the surroundings. Not much more complex than similar retro games, but without the hints that you'd get from a modern title. It does have some of those find the trigger moments where you're walking around the overworld or a town just looking for the right person to talk to or place to stand at. And you will come across areas you cannot reach early on that you will need to return to with a spell you eventually obtain. Not unlike a Metroidvania. Shrine's Legacy feels true to form for retro games in that aspect, and while it is nowhere near as bad as some of the worst offenders, it can still cause a bit of frustration where you might spend time wondering what you need to do. Once you complete an area, there's generally a boss. Some tend to have gimmicky aspects, again sort of like a Zelda game or maybe Illusion of Gaia. Patience and understanding a strategy helps a great deal. Doing well in combat involves knowing where to stand and the reach of your weapons, as well as what magic to use. There are some fun interactions with your magic and bosses, such as needing to use ice magic to freeze slimes the boss creates, then hit the frozen block at the boss to hurt it. However, for most bosses you can just solve problems by swinging your sword, and magic just adds damage or healing. Shrine's Legacy is a moderate challenge retro adventure game with fairly basic items, mild RPG elements, and a focus on exploration and combat. It does not spend too much time on story and does not give you too many different tools, but does utilize the spells you get for solving puzzles. Combat is fluid and easy to use, not requiring too many buttons or combos. It is intuitive and easy to cycle through your spells or swap characters without needing to go to the menu or ever slow down. Shrine's Legacy is a good retro adventure game that can be recommended for fans of SNES games like Zelda, Illusion of Gaia, or Secret of Mana, and being 2 players and a decent length, likely 15 to 25 hours to beat based on your skill, this is one of the best games of this type you will get from any indie developer. Shrine's Legacy earns a 7 out of 10.